Alrighty, everyone, welcome back. So, late last night or early this morning, the St. Louis Blues fired head coach Craig Berube. And I did make a video on that because I was actually up to see it and react to it. I didn't go too in depth with it. I was saying that I figured there may have been something more behind this. There probably isn't. The Blues just decided, yeah, we're going to fire him now. So there's nothing behind it. Like, he didn't do anything really wrong exactly. But I'm here to ask today, was the firing or was the team's success this year or the struggles really Berube's fault? And I've been balancing back and forth on this because I do think fault lies on both sides here, whether you think it's the GM's fault or it's the coach's fault, or the roster, in fact. But the roster kind of falls under the general manager. So we're going to go through it here bit by bit, starting off with where they were this part last season and where they are this year. So last year was a roller coaster, kind of like this year. But last year, I would say, was way more of a roller coaster because they started off undefeated, 4-0. Then they lost 7 straight. Then they won like 8 straight. And then they started winning, losing, and started being middle of the road a little bit. So at this time last year, they were 12, 15, and 1 for 25 points. This time this year, they're 13, 14, and 1 for 27 points. So they're only a game better at this point in the season through 28 games played. Now, that to me looks like it's the same numbers. And honestly, I'm a little bit surprised they fired Berube now because it feels like we're at the point where it's Christmas. We're almost at the halfway mark of the season. You would think that maybe they would just keep him around, but I think what Armstrong saw with the Woodcroft firing and the Evison firing, that maybe you fire the coach and things turn around. Now, obviously, Minnesota and Edmonton were supposed to be playoff teams, and they were also in the playoffs last year. St. Louis, however, was not. So that plays a factor here too in what I'm thinking. I feel like the fault lies on both sides because when you look at it, how much better was this roster than last year with what Berube had to work with? What was better with this roster this year than last year? Let's take a look at that. So I went and found their acquisitions and departures from last offseason. They lost Thomas Greiss, Tyler Pitlick, Josh Levo, and Logan Brown. So all in all, they didn't lose a lot. Greiss was their backup goalie. He retired. I think they brought in Hofer. He's been okay. He hasn't been awesome, but he's been solid. Obviously, Pitlick, Levo, and Brown are all depth players. They aren't huge names. They were guys that, at best, they were fourth liners. They weren't much more than that on St. Louis. So losing them wasn't that big of a deal. However, you could tell that there were some underlying problems with this Blues roster. Obviously, the defense played a massive factor. And the goaltending also was an issue for me, too. I thought secondary scoring was also a problem as well, which they kind of solved. I mean, Kevin Hayes has come in. He's done subpar for St. Louis. He's played 28 games, has 8 goals, 6 assists, 14 points. That's kind of what I expected out of Kevin Hayes. And that's kind of what I thought he was going to get coming from Philadelphia, which, by the way, I'm a Flyers fan at heart. You can see the Flyers jerseys around the room. I love Kevin Hayes, but I understand he's not worth the money he's getting paid for, and understandably so. St. Louis, I don't think, is even taking all of the contract. I believe Philadelphia is still paying for some of it. But I'd say 14 points in 28 games played is like 0.5 points a game. That's not terrible, but you want more, obviously. You want more secondary scoring out of a player like him, and especially him, too. He's getting top 6 minutes, I believe. So it's a little bit disappointing to see those numbers go. McEachern was also another guy they acquired. He has 2 points in 8 games played. He has not played a lot. I believe he's actually injured when I talk about this. And then Oscar Sundquist, too. 28 games played, 12 points. That's it. Those are all the guys they acquired. So, did Armstrong make an effort to get the roster better? Not really. I mean, honestly, him and Danny Briere were actually working together a much bigger trade than the Kevin Hayes deal, but Torrey Krug said no. I feel like that may get circled around back to again. Not Torrey Krug necessarily, but maybe a massive trade, not involving Philadelphia. But I think that Armstrong saw what happened this year and what's going on this year. Like, it's pretty much the same roster. There's not much differences from last year's roster and this year's roster. and you could just tell from that looking on paper. So, of course, they're going to probably have the same results. And honestly, this season is still salvageable. Like, this isn't a season where they're in like a 2-8 hole or they've only won 5 games that have lost like 20. Like, no, they're still in a pretty decent spot right now, and in a Central Division that I would say is wide open right now still. Like, look, you got Winnipeg, you got Colorado, and you got Dallas. Everyone else is battling for a spot right now. Nashville, Arizona, Minnesota, and St. Louis, I would say, are all battling for spots right now in that Central Division. So it's definitely still salvageable, and that's why I think this hiring partially happened. Because obviously, again, with the Woodcroft and Nevison situation, those I think played a role in why these guys and why Berube was fired. But I've seen some people say on social media that this is a big mistake. And on some level, I agree, because Berube won this team a Stanley Cup. He was highly respected by a lot of the Blues players. But honestly, this is kind of a scenario where I kind of feel like maybe he lost the room. I'm not saying that he did, but he might have. Honestly, because the team has been pretty subpar, and I mean, honestly, too, like the roster's not great either. So that I'm not putting that on Berube at all. I'm putting it on Armstrong. He has an aggressively subpar roster right now, but I think with his resume, winning a Stanley Cup, coaching this team to playoff spots when many people didn't think they would. I think in all the years he's been there, he's missed the playoffs once. So that's a pretty good stat line to have, and it was last season. So I think he will get a job again. And just like Evison and Woodcroft, he will get a job again once another position in the NHL opens up. Absolutely. He's one of the coaches in the league that will. But I feel like it might be a scenario with like Bruce Cassidy, for example, on Boston. Maybe just the system wasn't working anymore. And hopefully the new guy they brought in is going to help that out. Now let's look at their stats from this season and the guys who are providing offense for this Blues team. Thomas, 28 games played, 10 goals, 17 assists, 27 points. Thomas having a very good season. Overlooked, obviously, but still having a really good year. Pavel Buchnevich, 26 games played, 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points. He's also playing really well for St. Louis. Jordan Kyrou, 28 games played, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points. He's playing well. And then Luke Shen, who played 28 games, had 8 goals, 8 assists for 16 points. Kevin Hayes is 5th in scoring. So, the offense has been good. It's been solid. Obviously, there are players who haven't done too well, which is on every single team. It's not just on, just the main roster. But obviously, there are players who have struggled. Binnington, too, I feel like has calmed down. Like last year with Jordan Binnington, you saw so much criticism on the hockey world, and just like every night he'd be doing something stupid. Berube, I think, handled that very well. He said he needs to just be a goalie and get his head out of his butt. Pretty much what he said. But Binnington, 8-9-1, 3.1, and a .907. But we haven't seen any of the baby talks or him complaining at all or him going out and doing stupid things. So I definitely think he's matured a lot more this season, which is good on him. And I think it's really helped out his stats. Even though they aren't great, I still think it's played a factor in why he's been solid for the Blues. But yeah, I feel like the fault for them being where they are right now is on both sides. It's on Berube partially because I feel like they aren't the same Blues that we've seen previously. And it's also on Armstrong too because he didn't give Berube a lot more to work with this year. I know he tried with the big trade with Philadelphia, but obviously that got turned down. So definitely the Blues are just one of those teams where they're in that weird spot right now. And hopefully the new guy they brought in is going to turn this around. I feel like he will because you look at what John Hines is doing. You look at what Nolbach is doing. I think that he definitely can, and I think the roster is good enough to at least come close to a playoff spot. I don't know if I'd say it's a playoff spot, but obviously he's solely the intern coach, and they will be finding a new coach soon. Whether that's Woodcroft or Evison, we'll find out. But obviously, we'll see how St. Louis improves or regresses in the coming weeks. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. Hit the subscribe button down below. I would really appreciate it. But yeah, I feel like the fault lies on both sides here of this argument. I think it's more on Armstrong than it is on Berube, but Berube definitely deserves some of the blame. But anyways, let me know your thoughts below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.